As a Palestinian writer, curator, and researcher, she has collaborated with art and cultural organizations in Palestine, including the Khalil Sikakini Cultural Center in Ramallah and the Palestinian Art Courts in Jerusalem. Her academic journey includes a master's degree in cultural studies from Queen's University, where she focused on transnationalism and solidarity in the context of creating and preserving the cinema of the Palestinian Revolution. Currently, Lubna is engaged in the study of escaped letters written by Palestinian political prisoners in Israeli political jails, deepening her understanding of the complex narratives surrounding Palestinian resistance and identity. And it's my great honor actually to introduce Lubna. I met her a few years ago, and she was one of the few Palestinians that I knew here in Kingston. And yeah, she became a very good friend.
Knowing you has also been very helpful for me. Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you so much for giving me the space to talk about Palestinian culture, to divest from, or divest, like maybe to take a break from the horror that we have been hearing and witnessing and we have been exposed to for the last 7 months. My presentation will be about resistance, which is a very important part of the Palestinian narrative and has been a very important part of the Palestinian story. When I sat down to think about my presentation today, I had so much things to say, and at the same time, I was not sure what would be more useful to transmit this kind of information for you guys. So I thought maybe to tell you about how I understood culture in relation to resistance in Palestine. I grew up in Khalil. I joined a music conservatory in Bethlehem. Studied there for 2 years before I moved to Ramallah, where I studied English literature, sociology, and continued as a cellist with the conservatory as well as a teacher in their outreach program where I taught music for kids in refugee camps in Jerusalem, in Hebron, in Bethlehem, and different other areas. I also worked with different Palestinian artists in Zawiya Art Gallery in Ramallah, trying to present their work to a more international audience, especially in different art exhibitions in Europe and in the Middle East. So when I thought about Palestinian music, since I have an attachment to that topic, as someone who practiced music there myself, I thought maybe I can tell you about the different forms of music that women helped to create and preserve in Palestine for the last 100 years. I can tell you about the shalai. So sorry. Okay. Yeah, I thought to tell you about the shalayat, which is an expression of love and yearning that Palestinian women wrote and sang during the forced draftation in the last years of the Ottoman Empire, where they expressed their love, their yearning, how much they missed their men, how life looked for them, how they experienced love in that situation. And or another art form that emerged 20 years after that, which is the Tarwida, a coded form of song sang by Palestinian women who mastered this coded song form in order to communicate with their loved ones who were held in the British prisons without having their prisoner, who is a British soldier and who spoke Arabic poorly, to understand them. So they would use this coded songs, and sometimes these songs have a plan of how they will be escaped from the prison soon. I also thought to tell you about a small theater room in Ramallah few hundred meters away from the Muqata'a. And I don't know if you guys know or familiar with this concept. The Muqata'a is a prison system that the British Mandate Army created in Palestine, and then later turned into government buildings. The Muqata'a in Ramallah is very particular because, and especially at the time during the Second Intifada, because Yasser Arafat was besieged there until, let me see his death. So it's true that is a few hundred meters away from the Muqata'a, where I did my music exams every summer, where I performed my first concert. It is attached to Edward Said National Conservatory, and we're constantly under fire during like the early 2000s. I talked to Ahmed Al Khatib, who is an oud player based now in Switzerland because he was forcibly exiled from Palestine, to talk to me more about that room. And he told me that during the Second Intifada, they kept giving their students their lessons. They never stopped. They even held concerts while under siege and never stopped. He told me that whenever he was in the room with his students, he would tell them, okay, there's no firing now, let's just do the class. And once the firing starts, he would say, okay, we are stuck here, let's finish the class. And he told me about one particular evening where he said he will never forget when him and other teachers organized a music event in that small theater room. And in the middle of the event, the tank shell started. The audience, who were like approximately 30 people, stood up and wanted to leave. And then one of them from the audience stood up and said, no, our existence here, there is resistance. We're not gonna let a bunch of Israeli soldiers to determine when our concert starts and when our concerts end. By the end of that evening, the area was completely under siege and no one was able to leave. So they went, the music teachers with their audience, across one of the fences around the conservatory, and they slept overnight for 3 days in the neighbors because they were unable to leave afterwards. But he still told me that these were the most exciting 3 days he had because he had much time with his comrades, having conversations, playing music, and discussing politics. I also thought maybe I should tell you about Maram. Maram is a 12-year-old girl. She was one of my students in the old city of Hebron. I only had 6 students. Maram was the brightest. She was the most committed. She loved playing cello. For my 6 students, we only had one instrument, so they had to share it during the week to practice. And they actually managed to create a very efficient schedule among them to share the instrument so that everyone can practice. Maram, who never skipped a class, once came to me and told me, I'm not going to be able to come next week. And so I asked her why. And she told me, oh, my best friend at school just got shot and I'm helping her mom to get rid of herself. And so I asked her what happened. And she told me the story. And it was in 2015 when Israeli soldiers were killing anyone suspected of carrying a knife, a pen, or any sharp tool. So a 12-year-old was shot and was killed 2 days before the class. But next week, my mom came. She did not attend the entire class, and even though she had to cross 3 heavily militarized checkpoints in the 5 minutes walk between her house and the center where I gave my lecture. I don't know what happened of Maram. I don't know what happened of Maram now, but the last time I saw her was in 2016 when we organized an orchestra show, like a kids orchestra show, and Miriam was part of it in the Palestinian Museum's hall. She was smiling and she was happy, and this is how I like to remember her. All this to say that arts, culture, and resistance have always coexisted in Palestine. It's not a new topic. It's not, and it's actually a very beautiful topic because Palestinians, regardless, they were still able to create and perform their arts and also to use it as a method of imagining their realities, imagining a better future, and also to create some segments of the past they lost, not only during 1948, but also all the horrors that they experienced afterwards. And this is, of course, very obvious about Gaza today. I mean, if you look at the footage coming out from Gazan artists, they have been mobilizing their arts, their music, in order to help children escape moments of joy, in order to cling to whatever left in life. And I know that it will take us years to understand the toll that this war have brought on Palestinian intellectual life, on arts and on culture. We know that all the art institutions were destroyed or partially damaged. Most lately, it was the Kamanjati Conservatory that was bombed, and it was housing a lot of music teachers, a lot of artists with their families. I also noticed that poetry became the main form of arts, of resistance in the form of writing, I would say. And it's partially because poetry does not require a long time. It can be done on the go, and it can express deep feelings that I don't think other forms of arts can express. And that's true to the fact that if I must die, you must live to tell my story. And all other kinds of conversations between brothers or between a mother or between her children. You can see art and culture in all those small, intimate details among Palestinians, and all have been used to create a sense of this violence that they have been subjected to for one generation after another. Exactly 27 years ago, when the Nakba, the original trauma that we inherited from our parents, that we inherited not through our parents, but through the ever-shrinking geography in which can we move, live, or practice our life in Palestine. And it's a brutal reality under military occupation that only knows violence. And throughout these years, for the last 76 years, Palestinian arts have shifted as the struggle shifted, as the national imagination shifted, and as modes of resistance have shifted. In 1948, 75% of the Palestinians were evacuated from Palestine, and a big part of that were Palestinian writers, musicians, authors, artists, etc. And these people and the Palestinians who moved, they actually helped a lot of the countries that they moved to elevate, for example, the music production in Lebanon, or different publications in Jordan and otherwise. So in 1948, or I would say between 1948 and 1967, the main ideology, or not ideology, and that period is a period of loss, where Palestine question was not formed in the way that we talk about today. It was part of the Pan-Arab movement, in which a lot of people thought that the only answer for Palestine was to be included in a great Arab nation. And of course, don't forget that this is immediately after the Second World War, where the Middle East was dissected, was dissected by the Sykes-Picot agreement, in which Lebanon became under the French, Palestine was under the British mandate, and and so on and so forth. So people were against that at the time. So that Arab nationalism was the constant. So Palestinian art somehow reflected that. And here I want to quote one of the most, I would say, popular poems that were written at the time by Mahmoud Darwish. And it would tell you what does an Arab means for him. And it's called Identity Card. For those who don't know Mahmoud Darwish is one of the main poets, Palestinian poets. He was born in Bedouin, in the Galilee. He was then, when his family was evacuated or was forcibly evacuated from the village, they went to Lebanon for 2 days, and then his mom insisted that they would come back. So they come back 2 days later to their same place, but this time as refugees. Simply because they were not allowed to go back to Bedouin. Bedouin now is an Israeli settlement that only Israeli Jews can live in. Mahmoud Darwish, who grew up at the time under military control, and he was imprisoned for his poetry. Eventually, he was exiled first to Jordan, first to Egypt, then to Lebanon, where he witnessed the Beirut invasion. And I think his poems from the Beirut invasion are the closest you can get to understand what life was in Lebanon at the time, but also what's happening in Gaza today. So, but for this context, I will just recite part of his poem, Identity Card. It says, سجل أنا عربي ورقم بطاقتي 50,000 وأطفالي 8. I'm not gonna finish this in Arabic, I promise. But it says, write down, I am an Arab, and my identity number is 500,000, and I have 8 kids. And the 9th is due after a summer. So, will that get you mad? Write down, I am an Arab, and I work along my labor buddies in the stone quarry, and I got 8 kids. I secure them bread, clothing, and netbooks from the rocks, and I don't beg for charity at your doors, and I don't lower myself at the footsteps of your court. So will you be mad? Write down, I am an Arab. So this is what being an Arab means or meant at the time. And of course, part of the Israeli propaganda is to say, oh, Palestinians are Arabs, they never existed in Palestine, I don't know why, but it's just, I don't know, they're just taking advantage of some elements of the Palestinian identity in order to, to create their own, basically. Now, of course, and racism is part of it. Okay, so after the 1967 war, you know that Israel fought against Egypt and Syria and ended up conquering or taking the Sinai Desert, the Golan Heights until today, and the south of Lebanon. And Jamal Abdel Nasser, who was the symbol of Arab or Arab movement, and like this, the whole thing shattered when after the war, and especially that this figure passed away also 7 months later. So this allowed for a new Palestinian imaginary to emerge, this time not just as refugees, not just as the victims of Al-Nakba, but also as resistance and freedom fighters. And there are so many examples from that period to give you an insight on in this shifting. My favorite one is Ghassan Kanafani. Ghassan, who was the head of the Palestinian Liberation Front for Palestine. The Palestinian Front. Oh, okay. الجبهة الشعبية. Yeah, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So Ghassan was from Mecca, and he was in his late teens when he became a refugee in Lebanon, and of course maybe you guys know him because there is a video circulating for him in a conversation that he had with an Australian journalist saying, why don't you want peace? And Ghassan masterfully was arguing, peace does not mean surrender, and this is what we are doing. We don't equate peace with surrender, which is a question that is still being asked or being at the center of the Palestinian question today. Ghassan had a unique way that I don't think I've seen or had a unique way to approach Palestinian literature that I haven't seen in with other writers, because at the time it was all about building up the spirit. It's all about celebrating even the streets of the camps, the schools that are being bombed, the hunger even that the people were subjected to. It was seen as part of their fight for their lives. And Ghassan did so too, but without the lifting up aspect of it. He would take you down and down and down with the Palestinian experience without really getting you to a safe space at the end. So it just leaves this piece of work inside you, like a question that is never answered. And one important example of that is novel رجال تحت الشمس, or Men Under the Sun. And to summarize the story, it's basically the story of 3 Palestinian refugees who used to live in Iraq at the time and who wanted to go to Kuwait to work. And the only way to go there was by bribing someone. And that did not work. So eventually they ended up in a water tank in their way from Kuwait to from Iraq to Kuwait. Sorry, it was like, as I say, Men in the Sun. It was in the heat of the desert of that area. So the entire book is about the kind of conversation they had with their driver, the kind of conversations they had with themselves, their background. They are men who had absolutely nothing left to lose. And on each checkpoint, they would just go into the water tank until they passed and they go out. But in the last stop, the border control of Kuwait decided to joke with the driver for a while before they let him go. And this is when the driver realized that all men died inside the water tank. And Ghassan leaves us with this one question that I think is still ringing in Palestine as a cultural metaphor, which is why didn't they knock the fucking Ghassan or the tank? Um, so when I read this time, I thought that I would never have a question, like I never had an answer for this question. Why did they do that? Why didn't they do that? Even though these people had nothing to lose, but life is still worth it. And I remember reading a short story by him that is not very well known. I haven't seen a translated version of it, but it's a story about a man who dies he starts the story by a scene of death of a man walking towards a corner, and then there's nails that attacks him until he goes under the ground, and in the minute the forehead of the man touches the ground, another creature is created, but this time, like it's a creature under the ground. He describes it as a child who had ugly, dark face, but has the whitest heart that you could still see pierce through that darkness. He had no ears, he had no eyes, he just had this one white heart. And this creature, for years, Hassan described him as someone who is working under the ground tirelessly, getting injuries, getting old, getting weak, until he gets to a point where he questions, why is he still digging? Why is he still trying to move on? And this is when the story ends by Hassan Kanafani directly addressing this creature by telling him, don't die before you resist. So I feel like this is a very important period of the Palestinian culture in which this spirit have been building up to create basically an entire culture of resistance. You cannot look at Palestinian culture without seeing how it has been in an amazing way, but also in some ways affected by their constant attempt to just exist, to practice their lives, to cling to the little windows of hope in which they can still live. And I have been thinking about that lately very, very much because I grew up in a very traditional Palestinian environment. My dad was imprisoned once when I was a kid. I lost 20 family members during the massacre in Hebron in 1994. I lost my cousin during the second Intifada. I think maybe at least 5 times the Israeli soldiers threw tear gas bombs inside the school courtyard. So we were suffocating at 9 and 10 years old. I'm 10-year-old. I grew up next to a settlement in Hebron, and I don't know if you guys know, but in Hebron, it's the only city in which we have an Israeli settlement inside the city as well as surrounding it. And in that settlement, you could see the clearest form of apartheid there is. We are not allowed to walk on certain streets. My aunt was not allowed to use her main door because the settlers took the first floor and she was kept in the second floor. So she had to jump through the neighbor's roofs in order to go out or in. My aunt's kids would be held for hours every day on checkpoints just trying to go to school or coming back from school or even simply running an errand. And I have been dissecting all these little things that my mom would tell me or that my grandfather would tell me about their philosophy. It's not really an intellectual conversation, but this is what people practice, this is what people knew, which is to keep doing it, to keep resisting until it's better. Simply, it's better. Okay. So now I'm gonna move to after the period that is called, or the Palestinian revolution movement period, which was between 1967 and 1982. And of course, even though I only mentioned Hassan Karamani, we have an amazing artistic heritage from that period. Unfortunately, I would say 70% of that heritage, which included books, films, paintings, was looted by the Israeli army when they besieged Beirut in 1982. And this was the topic of my master's research here. I looked into ways in which these films were created as an international solidarity kind of art movement associated with the third cinema or the transnational cinema that at the time was happening in all different places around the world that they were going under struggle for their liberation. Cuba, Argentina, Chile, even in parts of Africa, in Japan, parts of Asia as well. And Palestinian authors and writers at the time managed to create this international dimension of the Palestinian culture and arts. This is when the question of Palestine or the liberation of Palestine became a topic for most leftist activists. That's why we had Che Guevara coming to Gaza in the 1950s. We had Malcolm X also coming to Gaza in the 1950s. Even today, we can see that the Palestinian question became part of the police brutality or equal human rights for everyone, or the student movements, the healthcare for all. It became essential for all these movements, and I think we don't really still understand how deep this is and how effective this will be because we are still doing it. But I'm sure that some real changes will happen after this war. So after the Palestinian Revolution movement, and just before the first Intifada, which where the struggle shifted from Lebanon or Jordan to be in Palestine, but we had a gap of few years, and in that gap, Palestinian arts and culture became more critical. Like they had more criticism in them. So they were able to criticize their own revolution. They were able to criticize Arab regimes around them. I think one of the main artists that you can use their material in order to understand that period is Najib Ali, who is a cartoonist who draw in his lifetime, I think, more than 40,000 art pieces. And and until he was assassinated in London by the Israeli Mossad in 1987. So I thought maybe to circulate these, just so that you guys understand before the context of it. I'm so sorry, it's not really well printed, but this is what I have. of how Palestinian arts can be read as historical documents, especially that we have been prevented from having archives for ourselves. Most Palestinian materials are either scattered in Europe or in the Middle East, or there's a huge chunk of it is looted in Israeli military archives that we have absolutely no access to. And that's why you would also notice, if you are interested in studying the Palestinian question, that you will have to rely a lot on narratives. You have to talk to people because you cannot find things in archives. In any attempt to create an archive, it's targeted and destroyed almost immediately. Even though I'm skipping a period here, which is the Second Intifada, because it's not a period that I have studied or had an interest in. I think the Second Intifada in my head is a traumatic time because I lived it, and I lived almost in the worst part in the West Bank, where, well, the worst part is Jenin, but at the time, but also the Hebron is divided into two areas, H1 and H2. And H2 is an area around this Israeli settlement, and it's completely under military control. This has not changed after Oslo. And in that area, we have 500 Israeli settlers and 2,000 soldiers, supposedly to protect them, but really to harass us. So yeah, it's not a period that I know much about in terms of arts, but I'm hoping to dive into more. Which brings us to this moment in time. This moment in time, again, I don't think we have the gravity. Like, we cannot know what Gaza and the infrastructure of Gaza have been through. We know that universities, organizations, and institutions, archives, even heritage buildings have been destroyed, like Masjid Umari, which is a place I always read about, I always wanted to go to. It's 1,400 years old, a mosque in Gaza that was completely destroyed last year. But I wanted to tell you about a recent article that I read in the Palestinian Studies magazine, which basically summarized a conference held in Israeli prisons. Like Palestinian prisoners were able to write down papers, communicate these papers with their peers in one form or another, because these are not permitted kinds of organizing ways to do things at the prison. And in which Walid Taha, one of the Palestinian prisoners who passed away last month after being held for 36 years without any charge, he described that Palestine today has 6 different geographies. And we can understand the Palestinian questions by addressing these geographies, or the differences between these geographies, which is the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Jerusalem, 1948, people in exile, as well as the 6th geography, which is prisons. So I wanted to just give you an example of the kind of arts and culture created in prison. Walid Taqa himself managed to escape 3 books, multiple articles, and he was one of the editors for the Palestinian Studies magazine since 2021 until he passed away last month. Walid is a very special case. I don't know, I came to know Walid in 2019, and at the time, Walid, who was known in Palestine for the first prisoner who got married in prison by a journalist who would come and interview him. They fell in love. They had a wedding inside the prison cell with 7 other people, but they never really had a chance to live a life outside. Walid eventually managed to escape his sperm in 2019, and he got killed, and he called her Milad. Milad in Arabic means birth, and I just wanted to read to you the article that he read, that he wrote as a message to his unborn daughter at the time. And her name in Arabic, in Arabic names are first name, father's name, and then family name. So he is Walid Taha, and his daughter is Milad Walid Taha. So basically, the birth of Walid Taha, if you want to understand it as a sentence. So he said, "Who can stop the time? And this is my blood that bleeds, not minutes." Actually, this is Milad. I'm writing for an unborn child. I'm writing for an idea or a dream. I write for a boy or a girl, my son or my daughter, who has not yet came to life. I write for the birth of future, or so we want to call for him or her. This is how I want the future to know us, dear Milad. Today, I ended my 25th year in prison, 9,131 days and a quarter. It is the number that never ends. It is the age of detention that has not yet came to an end. Today, I'm in my 50s. My age got caught between life and imprisonment. I feel all those days like a bladed knife on my neck. I'm breaking the even numbers of the days that I had between the prison and the life that I had once before. My memories are escaping me, and this prison is like the fire feeding on the wreckage of my memory. My dear, I am no more than a fire that has been turned off. I'm escaping what has left of it on a paper so that I would not get lost between the prison and the forgetfulness. As for you, my dear, you are the most beautiful thing that has ever escaped my memory. You are my message to the future. Do you think I have gone crazy? I'm writing for an unborn child? What madness! What is madness? A nuclear state fighting against an unborn child? Or for my dream to already, for you, my dear, to already have a file in the archives of the Israeli intelligence? What do you think? Should I stop dreaming? But I will still dream regardless of what reality might look like. And I will still search for the meaning of life despite what I have already lost out of it. Let me keep excavate the graves of the past and search for the delusion of the original. Oh, sorry. Let me stay there. Yeah. I will search for the meaning of life, despite what I have already lost out of it. Let them keep excavate the graves of the past, searching for the delusional originality. As for us, we will keep looking for a better future, but for us and for our grandchildren. Peace on you, Milad. Peace on you, my dear. And here, my dream has been born. Walid. So unfortunately, Walid was supposed to be released in 2023 or 2021. This is when his supposed sentence was finished, but then the Israeli army decided to keep him imprisoned. He was diagnosed with cancer and he passed away before he was able to hold the hands of his daughter Milad. But she's a very beautiful and healthy little child. So what I feel like Walid's letter can summarize a lot about what Palestinian resistance and resistance for a better future looks like. Through these escape moments of happiness that we can get and we can elevate on. And despite the destruction in Gaza today, I'm sure that the boys and the girls of Gaza will feel something way much better in the future. Thank you so much.